Ethan St. James sat in the corner suite of his high-rise office, the skyline of the city glinting behind him like a kingdom he'd conquered. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled just enough to give the illusion of accessibility. The photographers loved him this way, polished but human. That was the brand. His assistant, Ben, slid the invitation box across the glass table. Black velvet with gold trim, minimalist. Last one, he said. You sure about this? Ethan didn't respond right away. He picked up the envelope like it was a weapon. Inside was a single white card, Legacy Gala, a night of power and philanthropy. No mention of the real reason. The true performance wasn't on the stage. It was walking through the door. She'll come, Ethan said finally, a smirk ghosting the corner of his mouth. She always does. Ben hesitated. She's 8 months now, right? Ethan looked out the window. Perfect. She'll waddle in like a headline. Ben opened his mouth, then closed it. He'd seen Claire only once, at a product launch years ago. She was polite, reserved, maybe even elegant. But in Ethan's world, dignity was often mistaken for weakness. In a cramped third-floor walk-up with peeling paint and humming radiators, Claire Keller stared at the envelope resting on her kitchen table. Her fingers traced the edges without opening it. She already knew what it was. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. She was barefoot, wearing an oversized t-shirt and leggings stretched by her growing belly. The apartment smelled faintly of ginger tea and lavender oil. Peace lived here, quiet, hard-earned, but the invitation had a pulse, like something alive. Unwelcome. She finally opened it and read the card. Then, slowly, she smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind that knew what the game was, what it always had been, and more importantly, that it was still being played. She rose, moved to the fridge, and pressed the ultrasound photo to the door with a chipped magnet. 3 small dots hovered inside the black and white blur. .3 as she exhaled through her nose and ran her hand over her stomach. You're not a mistake, she whispered. None of you are. Back at his penthouse, Ethan leaned against the balcony railing, watching the lights below flicker like nervous eyes. The city worshipped him. Tech messiah, visionary, bachelor reborn. He sipped his scotch. She'll want to show she's above it, he murmured to himself. But she'll come. They always come. He remembered the last time he saw Claire, silent. At the divorce hearing, hands folded, no ring, no tears. It irritated him. The absence of drama. The refusal to unravel in public. As if she controlled the ending. This was his rewrite. He needed the world to see her now. Bloated, broke, alone. A woman left behind. A failed chapter. And he needed them to see what he'd become since. The gala would be his crowning moment. The new fiancé. The cameras. The whispers. All curated. And Claire would be the footnote he stepped over. In the quiet of her living room, Claire looked out at the fire escape, the stars hidden behind smog. Her hand drifted to her belly again. One of the babies kicked softly. She sat down and pulled out a small notepad. On it, she began to write a list. Dress. Hair. Car service. Photographer. A new smile spread on her lips. This one slower, deeper. He wanted her to come. She would, but not for him, for them. And when she walked through those doors, it would not be as the woman he left behind, but as the one he never saw coming. The dressmaker's voicemail played softly in the background as Claire sat on the edge of her bed, eyes distant, fingers running slowly over the notepad she'd started. The night before, she hadn't moved in an hour. Her gaze shifted to a cracked picture frame on the nightstand. The photo inside was fading, her wedding day. Her smile, radiant. Ethan's hand on her back. He'd looked at her then like she was a rare investment he'd secured. She picked it up, stared, and whispered, "You almost had me." The memories began to bleed through. Their wedding had been featured in a lifestyle magazine, Tech Royalty. Ties the knot with graceful designer bride. 5 pages of curated perfection, glass chandeliers, imported orchids, and a honeymoon villa overlooking a private bay. But she remembered the silence more than the celebration. Ethan had spoken endlessly during interviews and toasts. But in the quiet moments, in the hallway before bed, at the breakfast table, in the doctor's waiting room, he became a stranger. Charming to the world, cold to her. "You're imagining things," he'd say, when she asked if something was wrong. "You always overthink." He had a way of saying it that made her question herself. Like her instincts were flaws. Like she owed him her silence. Then came the late nights. "I'm at the office," he texted once, long after midnight. But the office line rang unanswered, and his assistant, Tara, didn't reply either. Tara. That was the moment everything shifted. Claire noticed it before she admitted it. The nervous glances between them. The unexplained absences. The lipstick she found in his gym bag that wasn't hers and didn't match anything she owned. When she confronted him, his eyes narrowed. "Do you hear yourself?" he said coolly. "You sound unstable. Maybe you need help." That was gaslight, but she didn't have a word for it then. What she did have was silence, and slowly, she began to disappear. She remembered the final dinner they had before everything cracked. A charity gala, another red carpet night, another PR smile. Claire wore a backless silver dress, 6 hours in the making. Ethan barely looked at her. After the applause, the photos, the mingling with politicians and board members, he leaned toward her in the car and said, "Next time, try something that fits better." He hadn't seen the tears, not then. The darkness of the tinted windows hid her reflection as she turned her face away. She didn't argue. She just folded in a little more. Back in the present, Claire returned the frame to the nightstand. Carefully. No hate. No sadness. Just acknowledgement he had turned their marriage into a business deal. A contract. One he thought could be broken without consequence. But there were echoes he couldn't silence. The babies she now carried weren't symbols of weakness. They were witnesses. And when she thought back to the night she finally left, bags packed, apartment quiet, her heart flatlined from trying. She remembered how free it felt to walk away without begging to be understood. No confrontation. No slammed doors. Just her, finally choosing herself. And yet, he still thought she was broken. Still thought he could summon her like a prop. Claire stood and walked to the closet. She ran her fingers over her old design boards, long shelved. A gown sketched in soft pencil, flowing lines, strong shoulders, a slit that didn't ask permission. She pulled the board out and pinned it to the cork wall. The past had its place, but now it was time to dress for the future. The room was sterile, humming with soft mechanical sounds and the distant clatter of nurses' shoes. Claire lay still on the exam table, her shirt lifted just enough for the gel smeared across her belly. The monitor glowed beside her in quiet rhythm. The doctor, an older woman with kind, unreadable eyes, nodded slowly. 3 heartbeats. She said gently, "You're carrying triplets." Claire blinked, lips parting slightly. "Triplets," she repeated. The doctor nodded again. "They look strong. Fraternal. You're doing well, considering." Claire let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It wasn't panic that rose inside her. It was something else. Something calmer. Heavier. Almost anchoring. She pressed her hand to her stomach as the images shifted on the screen. 3 little orbs of life. 3 echoes of a man who had once made her feel invisible. Now, she was filled with something undeniable. By late afternoon, she was back home, curled up on her worn couch with the ultrasound photo pressed gently between her fingers. The tea on the table had gone cold. The apartment was quiet, too quiet, but the silence didn't feel empty today. It felt earned. The front door creaked open without a knock, just like it always did when Marla stopped by. "Claire?" The old woman's voice called gently. "I brought those lemon cookies you liked last time." Claire didn't move. "In here." Marla stepped into the living room, holding a small tin. Her salt and pepper hair was twisted into its usual low bun, her sweater too big, her eyes sharp beneath the softness. She took one look at Claire's face and paused. "Something happened," she said, setting the tin down. Claire turned the photo toward her. "Triplets," she whispered, a soft laugh escaping. 3. Marla's eyebrows lifted. "Well, damn." They sat in silence for a moment, the air between them warm and unhurried. Marla finally spoke again, quieter this time. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Claire stared at the photo. "I don't think I'm supposed to be, but I am." And then she smiled. Not the polite, practiced smile people wore at church or the supermarket. This one was deeper, sharper, the kind of smile born from something buried long ago, now rising. Marla tilted her head. "That's a dangerous smile." Claire didn't answer right away. She set the photo down gently on the table. The edges curled just slightly, like it was already living a life of its own. "He wanted a show," Claire said finally. Marla frowned. Who? Claire stood, brushing her hands on her leggings. The man who built the stage. The one who invited me to stand under the lights. Marla watched her closely, something old and knowing flickering in her eyes. And you're going? Oh, I'll be there, Claire said. But not for him. Marla opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. There was nothing left to say. Claire disappeared into the bedroom, and the sound of fabric rustling followed. Drawers opening. A pencil scratching against paper. She was sketching again, not to distract herself, but to prepare to. Outside the apartment window, the streetlights blinked on as dusk fell. In the kitchen, the ultrasound photo lay next to the cookies. Marla stared at it a moment longer, then nodded to herself. She recognized that smile. Had worn it once, and she knew exactly what it meant. The ballroom at the Harrington Hotel shimmered with anticipation. Gold-draped tables, crystalline chandeliers, and 100 floral centerpieces all said one thing. Ethan St. James spared no expense when it came to legacy. He stood at the center of it all, dressed in a tailored midnight blue tuxedo, barking final notes to the event manager. Not roses. White peonies. They photograph better, he said, eyes scanning the unfinished room like a director before curtain call. And the lighting, soft gold, not that overhead junk. Across the room, a stylist flitted around Jasmine, dabbing her cheek with highlighter. She was half Ethan's age, all angles and effortlessness, the kind of woman who spoke in hashtags and had never heard the word settle. She adjusted the neckline of her silk gown and caught Ethan's gaze. He smiled, approving. You like it? She asked, twirling once. You look perfect, he said. She looked exactly like Claire did at 26, down to the soft brown waves, subtle smoky eye, and high-neck satin gown. But Jasmine had something Claire didn't back then. No resistance that I know. Questions, just shine. Ben, standing near the tech crew, noticed the resemblance too. He'd been with Ethan long enough to see the cycle. Ethan didn't date women. He replaced them. I swear she could be Claire's shadow, one of the servers whispered as they passed, tray in hand. Ben crossed his arms, watching Ethan instruct the press team on camera angles. What happens when the shadows stop following? He murmured. Ethan turned toward Ben, catching the tail end of the remark. You say something? Ben shook his head. Just wondering. You really think Claire's coming? Ethan chuckled, low and dismissive. She'll come. Barefoot. Probably with stretch marks and tears in her eyes. He lifted a glass of champagne from a passing tray. She always hated attention. She'll crumble the minute the cameras turn. Ben didn't smile. People change. Ethan waved it off. Not her. Claire's soft. She lives for dignity. That's how I know she'll show. Ben studied his boss. There was a sharpness in Ethan lately, too rehearsed, too brittle beneath the bravado. For a man so sure of his own narrative, he talked about Claire an awful lot. He remembered something Claire once said at a product launch years ago. She'd stood behind Ethan as he took credit for a team innovation, her eyes quiet but clear. He's the kind of man who builds castles out of smoke, she'd whispered. Ben hadn't understood. It then. He did now. In a dressing suite upstairs, Jasmine scrolled through her phone. Hey, she called, looking up. Who's this Claire everyone keeps whispering about? Ethan, standing near the mirror adjusting his cufflinks, shrugged. My ex. She coming tonight? He paused. Maybe. Jasmine arched an eyebrow. Why invite her? History, he said coolly. And closure. She studied his reflection. Closure or revenge? Ethan didn't answer, just smirked. She turned away, but her lips pressed into a thin, uncertain line. Later, as the decorators placed the final centerpieces, Ethan walked the floor alone. The chandeliers cast golden halos around him. He didn't just want Claire to come, but he needed her to see it. The life he had without her. The woman he'd upgraded to. The world that had moved on. He was certain she'd break under it. But in a small Brooklyn apartment, Claire's fingers brushed against satin and silk. Her new gown was nearly complete. And she wasn't coming to crumble. She was coming to close the chapter. On her terms. Claire's apartment smelled faintly of eucalyptus and fresh linen. The windows were cracked open just enough to let in the late spring air, thick with the hum of city life. Inside, however, everything was still, quiet, intentional. The gown hung from the top of the closet door, an elegant river of fabric and soft champagne silk. draped and structured in all the right places. It moved like water when touched, but held like armor when worn. Every stitch was hers. Claire stood barefoot in front of it, running her hand slowly down the hem. Her belly curved prominently now, but her spine remained straight, proud. She had designed the dress to work with the weight of her body, not against it. Behind her, Marla packed a small overnight bag. Hospital card, water bottle, change of clothes, diapers. She chuckled. Not that you'll need them at a Millionaire's gala. Claire glanced over her shoulder. Better to be ready. Just in case. Marla nodded, eyes lingering on her. You really made that? Claire nodded. From scratch. Patterned to hem. Damn, Marla muttered. That's not a dress. That's a message. Claire smiled softly. It's the only voice I've ever had that he couldn't interrupt. The air hung thick with unsaid things. The past. The pain. The memories Claire never had to describe because Marla already knew them. Some wounds were universal. I was once in your shoes, you know, Marla said, folding the baby blanket carefully. Walked into a room where I wasn't wanted, just to prove I still mattered. Scariest walk of my life. Claire looked at her. What happened? Marla shrugged. Didn't go the way I imagined. But I walked out taller than I walked in. Sometimes, that's all the wind you need. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, a car horn wailed and faded. A cat knocked over a trash can in the alley. Claire reached for the dress, holding it against her body as she faced the mirror. She shifted slightly, then stepped forward, balancing the weight of her belly with the grace of someone who'd already practiced the walk 100 times in her mind. She turned left, then right, then pivoted slowly, letting the fabric catch. The dim light, like moonlight on still water, Marla watched with a strange reverence. You look like the final chapter. Claire exhaled. Let him have his moment, she said quietly. Then I'll take mine. She folded the dress gently into the garment bag and zipped it closed with care. Not a single motion was rushed. She wasn't just going to show up tomorrow. She was going to arrive as Claire turned off the lights and slipped into bed, the baby bag by the door and the gown ready by the window. A calm settled over the room like mist. The storm would come, but for now, there was peace. The night glittered. The Harrington Hotel's grand entrance pulsed with camera flashes, velvet ropes, and murmuring reporters angling for headlines. A giant gold banner flapped above the revolving door. The Legacy Gala, hosted by Ethan St. James. Beneath it, Ethan posed perfectly, one hand in his pocket, the other resting lightly on Jasmine's lower back. She sparkled under the lights. Her silver gown a mirror of ambition. Yet something about her smile looked fixed, not fluid. She glanced toward Ethan more than the cameras, as if seeking reassurance that she belonged in the frame. Inside, champagne flowed like water. Every table gleamed. Every guest sparkled with money or influence, or both. Ben lingered by the far wall, pretending to check his clipboard. His eyes weren't on the guest list. They were fixed on the door. She's not coming, Jasmine said softly, leaning into Ethan. You said she would. She'll show, Ethan replied, lifting a glass. She likes to make entrances. You sound nervous. He turned to her, tone clipped. I'm not. But his eyes betrayed the tension building behind his smooth exterior. Then it happened. The doorman turned, spoke quietly into his headset, and opened the velvet rope that a sleek black car pulled up. The door opened. Out stepped Claire, alone. Her hair was swept into a loose chignon, exposing her neckline. Her gown, soft champagne silk with an empire waist, moved like wind and water combined. Her belly curved beneath it, proud and undeniable. And though she leaned ever so slightly on a low heel, her posture was regal. The cameras, for a heartbeat, forgot who Ethan St. James was. Click. Flash. Click. Flash. Claire paused on the carpet. The lights caught the shimmer in her gown. She didn't hide her belly. She highlighted it. Her hand rested lightly on it as she smiled, not coyly, but with confidence. Reporters whispered. Guests turned. Inside, Jasmine stiffened. She's huge. Ben whispered under his breath. She's magnificent. Ethan said nothing. Claire entered the room like she owned it. Like she'd always belonged in it. Like she was the moment. She stopped in front of Ethan and Jasmine, her eyes meeting his, steady, unafraid. Claire, he said, mouth dry, forcing a grin. You look radiant. She smiled. Congratulations, she said softly, holding his gaze. On surviving without me. Gasps fluttered through the crowd like wind through glass. Ethan's smile faltered. Jasmine glanced between them, suddenly aware she was standing in a triangle. Claire turned to Jasmine, offered a polite nod, then walked past them both. She didn't look back. Ben stepped aside, clearing her a path as if it had been planned. Ethan stood frozen, champagne glass trembling. The room, once his stage, had been quietly stolen. Not with a tantrum, not with revenge, but with poise, with power, with presence. As Claire made her way deeper into the ballroom, guests parted like water around her. Whispers followed. Is she really pregnant with triplets? She looks fearless. Why would he invite her? Why would she come? Claire ignored them all. She wasn't here to explain. She was here to arrive, and she had. The women's powder room at the Harrington Hotel was a world of its own. Polished marble counters, gold-framed mirrors, and soft lighting that made even sleepless eyes look rested. The hum of the gala barely penetrated the thick walls. Claire stood before the mirror, dabbing her wrist with cool water. Her reflection stared back, elegant, composed, unreadable. Behind her, the ultrasound photo was tucked safely into her clutch, resting against a small compact and a folded note she hadn't read in months. The door opened. Claire met the eyes of the woman she knew would come. Jasmine stepped in, heels clicking softly against the floor. Her gown glittered with too many sequins. Her lip gloss freshly reapplied. But the confidence she wore earlier had cracked. Just slightly. You're beautiful, Jasmine said, her voice barely above a whisper. That dress is, wow. Claire nodded, not smiling. Thank you. An awkward silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of the faucet dripping behind them. Jasmine moved closer, arms folded. Everyone out there is staring at you. Claire shrugged. That's not new. Another pause. Jasmine bit her lip, then blurted, Are they his? The words hung in the air like smoke. Sharp, cloying, impossible to ignore. Claire slowly turned. To face her. Her eyes didn't flinch, didn't blink. You're asking the wrong question, she said quietly to Jasmine's brow furrowed. What does that mean? Claire stepped closer, not threatening, not kind, just present. Solid. You want to know if the babies are his, Claire said, voice like silk stretched over steel. But the real question is, does it matter? Jasmine opened her mouth, then closed it. Claire continued. If they are, that makes me the woman he left pregnant with 3 children. If they're not, that makes me a woman who showed up tonight and made the entire room forget about you. Jasmine's face twitched. You're in love with him, Claire said, not as a question. That's the other wrong question. Because the right one is, does he even know how to love anyone but himself? Silence. A slow breath from Jasmine. Claire picked up a paper towel, dabbed her hands dry, and tossed it into the bin. Jasmine finally whispered, Why did you come? Claire looked at her one last time. To remind him what he gave up, and to remind myself why I never begged him to stay. She walked past Jasmine and paused at the door. Some things you lose are blessings. Others, lessons. And with that, Claire disappeared into the corridor, leaving the air heavy behind her. Jasmine stood alone, staring at her own reflection now. Lipstick perfect, posture elegant, but eyes uncertain. Outside, applause erupted again. Someone had just made a toast, but inside that bathroom, something else had been shattered. Not a friendship, not a rivalry, but a belief. Ben stood near the catering table, untouched glass of champagne in hand, eyes fixed on Ethan. Something in the way his boss was pacing by the tall windows gave off the energy of a man unraveling beneath polished cuffs. From across the room, Ethan kept glancing toward the ballroom doors. His jaw clenched. His smile, when offered, was brittle and mechanical. Ben finally stepped forward. Can I talk to you? Ethan looked up, impatient. Now. It's important. They moved into a side hallway just off the ballroom, dimly lit, lined with portraits of dead philanthropists. The music softened behind thick walls. Ben glanced over his shoulder once, then reached into his pocket and tapped his phone's screen. Voice recorder. He slipped it back in. I saw the guest list a week ago, Ben said carefully. Claire wasn't on it. Ethan exhaled through his nose. She didn't need an invitation. I knew she'd come. You wanted her to. Ethan scoffed. Of course I did. That's what this night's about. Ben stared. You planned. This whole thing just to humiliate her. Ethan turned sharply, voice rising. She left me like I was nothing. Just packed her bags and vanished. No goodbye, no drama, no chance to rewrite the story. She was pregnant. I didn't know that. Ben blinked. Would it have mattered? Ethan stepped closer, eyes narrow. I built her. Every dress she wore, every seat she got at those fashion events. It was because of my name, my money. And she repaid me by making me look small. Ben kept his posture still, but his stomach turned. She's carrying triplets, Ethan. And Ben's voice was lower now. She walked into that room tonight and took all the air out of it. You saw it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't even raise her voice. Ethan clenched his fists. Exactly. That's the problem. Ben furrowed his brow. She plays the victim so damn well. Ethan hissed. Always has. But you and I both know who she was behind closed doors. Fragile, emotional, needy. I just gave her the spotlight tonight. Let everyone see who she really is. Ben stepped back slightly, throat dry. You wanted her to break. Ethan smirked. Didn't work, though? She's better at the game than I remembered. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Ben said, quietly, You don't even care if those kids are yours, do you? Ethan shrugged. Why would I? She'll keep them out of my life. And if she doesn't, a lawyer will. Ben stared at him, something shifting behind his eyes. You should head back, Ethan said, adjusting his cufflink. Smile for the donors. Ethan walked off, leaving Ben alone in the hallway. Ben reached into his pocket and slowly stopped the recording. He didn't know what he was going to do with it. Not yet. But he knew this. It didn't belong to him. It belonged to someone who knew what silence could cost. Upstairs, Claire sat in a side lounge, away from the noise, sipping water slowly. Her hand rested over her stomach as the baby shifted. Her phone buzzed at a message from an unknown number. .1. File attachment. No text. She opened it. Ethan's voice filled the room. And this time, he couldn't take it back. The gala was winding down, though its aftershocks still echoed in the corners of the hotel. Ethan had disappeared from the ballroom. Jasmine was nowhere to be seen. But Claire had no interest in staying any longer. She slipped out a side exit with practiced ease, her gown still perfect, her steps slower now, but steady. In the lobby, she spotted Marla, seated quietly near the window, knitting needles in her lap and a half-finished scarf bundled beside her handbag. You came, Claire said, surprised. Marla didn't look up. Of course I did. I may be old, but I wouldn't miss a queen's coronation. Claire smiled, sinking into the seat beside her with a soft sigh. I'm exhausted. You look like a woman who just walked through fire and didn't smell of smoke. They sat in silence for a moment as the hotel staff began ushering out the final guests. The world outside was dark and quiet, but inside Claire, something buzzed, steady and alive. Marla reached over, gently touching her hand. You okay? Claire hesitated. Ben sent me something. Marla raised an eyebrow. A recording, Claire said. Of Ethan. His real thoughts. His plans. The truth. Marla nodded, unsurprised. Are you going to use it? Claire's hand rested on her stomach, the weight of the baby's grounding her. I don't need to. Marla studied her. Then why are you still carrying it? Claire looked out the window, her voice low. Because someday, they might need to hear it. Marla waited. Claire continued. He's the father. All three are his. Every heartbeat belongs to him. She paused. But only I get to love them. Marla blinked slowly. You never told him? No, no child support. Claire shook her head. Never asked. Never needed it. Marla exhaled. That's a heavy silence to carry. Claire nodded. But it was mine. He chose to walk away. I chose not to follow. The elevator dinged across the lobby, and Claire glanced over her shoulder instinctively, but no one stepped out. I used to think silence meant surrender, she said softly. But now I know, it can mean survival. Marla squeezed her hand. And sometimes, it's the loudest thing in the room. Claire smiled, this one real and soft. People think power is shouting louder. But sometimes, it's saying nothing and letting them wonder why. The baby shifted again. She exhaled, slowly and stood, her body aching in places she didn't talk about, but her spirit upright. You ready? Marla asked. Claire nodded. More than ever. They began to walk toward the exit. Behind them, the gala lights dimmed. Ahead of them, the night waited. And somewhere between the two, Claire walked tall, unbent by the man who tried to erase her. Unburdened by the truth she never owed him. By morning, the chandeliers at the Harrington Hotel had gone dark, the peonies wilted. The red carpet rolled away like a discarded dream. But the whispers hadn't stopped. In fact, they were only getting louder. The 10-minute audio file began circulating in inboxes across Ethan's investor network, forwarded with subject lines like, "You need to hear this," and "Urgent, St. James reputation risk." The voice was unmistakably his, confident, cold, venomous. "She plays the victim so damn well. I built her. If they're mine, I'll bury it in court." By noon, the media had picked it up. Headlines spread like wildfire. Exclusive. Audio reveals Ethan St. James' vicious remarks about pregnant ex-wife. She'll come barefoot with stretch marks. The fall of a tech icon. Claire Keller walked into his gala. He didn't know it'd be his funeral. Inside his downtown office, Ethan stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, staring blankly at the skyline that once crowned him king. His phone vibrated with frantic messages from legal, PR, board members. "Pull out. Crisis team activated. We're exposed." He didn't answer any of them. Jasmine was gone. Ben was unreachable. And Claire? Claire hadn't said a word. Not one press release. Not one interview. Just silence, which made it worse, because silence gave the world room to fill in the blanks, and they did so with fury. That afternoon, a video surfaced on social media. No music, no captions, just Claire, sitting beneath a tree in a quiet city park. Dressed in soft linen, her hair loose, she cradled 3 sleeping infants in her lap. Sunlight poured through the branches above, casting soft shadows across her face. As she smiled, not for the camera, but for them, someone, probably Marla, had recorded the moment from afar. The video was only 20 seconds, but it burned through the internet like wildfire. Millions viewed it. Millions shared it. The top comment: "Read simply, some power can't be bought or broken." Ethan watched the clip alone in his office. No sound, no comeback. Just heard AT piece. Unbothered that he closed his laptop roughly and paced the room. There would be damage control. He'd hire better PR, spin it, blame stress, say he was taken out of context. But no campaign could touch what that video had done. She didn't humiliate him. She outgrew him, and the world saw it. Elsewhere in the city, Claire sat with Marla at the edge of the same park. The babies were asleep in their stroller. The wind was gentle. The world, for the first time in years, felt still. Marla handed her a folded newspaper. Claire didn't need to read it. The headline said enough. "The St. James scandal. A tech empire on the brink." Claire folded it again and tucked it beneath the bench. "You still glad you didn't speak?" Marla asked. Claire smiled. "The moment I say anything, it becomes a debate. Let them listen to him for once. You're winning." Claire looked down at her babies. "No, I'm just living." The wind rustled the leaves overhead. The sun dipped lower, and somewhere far above the city, Ethan St. James watched his empire crack beneath the weight of his own voice. The wind smelled of honeysuckle and rain. Claire stood barefoot on the back porch of her new home, one hand wrapped around a warm mug of tea, the other resting lightly on the wooden railing. A swing creaked gently beside her. Empty for now, but waiting. The house was modest, white-trimmed, and tucked in a quiet neighborhood just outside the city. It had wide windows, soft floors, and walls that hadn't learned how to echo pain. Inside, 3 bassinets sat side by side near a tall window. Soft lullabies hummed from a speaker nearby. A mobile of handmade stars spun slowly overhead, casting shadows like tiny galaxies on the wall. Marla padded quietly into the kitchen, still in her robe, hair pulled back in a scarf. She was humming. "You're up early," she said. Claire smiled. "Habit." Marla filled the kettle. "The babies sleep through the night." "Almost," Claire said, setting the mug down. "We're getting there." Marla leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're stronger than I ever was at your age." Claire looked over. "No, I just had you." They shared a smile that needed no words. The mail came around noon. Claire sifted through envelopes, baby store coupons, a letter from a friend, and, slightly crumpled at the corner, a thick legal envelope with the St. James Holdings logo stamped on the front. She didn't flinch. Inside was a single-page notice: formal inquiry into Ethan St. James. Federal corporate fraud investigation. Phase 2 subpoena notice. She folded it neatly and slipped it into a drawer with others just like it. She had stopped following the news. His name didn't matter anymore. Not here, not where healing lived at that afternoon. While the babies napped, Claire sat at the sewing machine in her studio, formerly the sunroom. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, mood boards hung with tiny pins, and a dress in progress waited patiently on the mannequin. She adjusted the thread tension and pressed the pedal. The hum of the machine filled the room. It was the sound of becoming. Not revenge, not reaction, but return. To herself. As twilight crept in, Claire carried all 3 babies into the nursery, one by one. Lucas, gentle and wide-eyed. Mia, fussy but quick to settle. And Noelle, the quiet watcher. She settled into the rocking chair and began to nurse them one after the other. The room was warm, golden with fading light. A stack of bedtime books sat nearby. A framed photo of the ultrasound still hung on the wall. "You won't remember any of this," Claire whispered. "Not the house. Not tonight. Not me singing off-key." She smiled down at them. "But I'll remember all of it." Their tiny fingers curled around hers, warm and trusting. "You don't need your father to know your worth," she said softly, brushing a strand of hair from Mia's forehead. "You'll find it in each other. In the mirror. In the silence that doesn't ask you to shrink." She rocked slowly. "I'll teach you what love really looks like." Her voice didn't shake, because it wasn't a promise. It was a plan. Later, that night, after Marla had gone to bed and the house was still, Claire walked into the nursery one last time. The babies slept soundly, the mobile turning lazily in the breeze from the cracked window. She stood in the doorway, watching, not with sorrow, not with pride, but with peace, the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself, that slips in quietly when the war has ended. She walked over, kissed each tiny forehead, then sat in the rocking chair again, arms empty but heart full. Outside, the moon hung low and silver. Inside, Claire closed her eyes and smiled. Not out of vengeance, but release. The story wasn't about how she was broken. It was about how she refused to stay that way. And now, 3 heartbeats later, her life had finally begun again.